In a courtroom meant for justice, mockery takes its place. Officers laugh at a lone black woman, flaunting arrogance as if the law itself belongs to them. Yet her silence carries more weight than their noise, and a single symbolic act tilts the air. By the end, a cliffhanger reveals she is far more than they imagine. "Sit down, woman. You don't belong in a place like this." The words dropped like a hammer, echoing across the marble courtroom. Laughter burst from the cluster of uniformed officers seated behind the prosecution table, bouncing sharply off the high ceilings. Their laughter wasn't joy, it was the laughter of men who believed themselves untouchable. The courtroom smelled faintly of varnished oak and cold paper, its air heavy with silence from the public gallery. Citizens sat stiff, avoiding eye contact, while the judge, an aging man with lined cheeks and tired spectacles, watched without a word. His gavel lay untouched, as though justice itself had no place here. The black woman at the center stood perfectly still. She was tall, dressed in a charcoal gray suit that matched the seriousness of her gaze. Her presence was quiet yet magnetic, a stone pillar in the middle of storming waves. While the laughter tried to reduce her, her silence made her larger. Lead officer leaned forward, arrogance gleaming in his narrowed eyes. "You think you can come here and lecture us? This is our court. We decide what happens. You?" He chuckled, sneering. "You're nothing more than a distraction." The officers behind him howled louder, one even slapping the table in mock applause. The mockery grew like a poisonous fog, filling every inch of the chamber. Her eyes never left his. She didn't blink, didn't flinch. The calm in her gaze contrasted every ounce of their noise. Then came the symbolic action. The officer snatched the folder she had laid neatly on the table. With a smirk, he pulled out her ID card. The plastic edge glinted under the harsh fluorescent light as he waved it mockingly. "This? What is this supposed to be? A toy? Maybe. You printed it out on your home computer. Look, boys, our guest thinks she's important." More laughter. The ID dangled from his fingers like it was nothing more than a joke. She inhaled slowly. For the first time, she spoke not loud, not desperate. Her voice was low, steady, yet cutting through the noise like a blade through silk. "You should not hold what you cannot understand." The laughter faltered for a beat. A few officers glanced at each other, unsure whether to laugh again. The officer holding her ID raised an eyebrow, chuckled nervously, and dropped the card carelessly onto the table. The plastic cracked against the wood, its seal catching the light for just a second. The woman reached down, lifted the card with delicate precision, and slid it back into her folder as though restoring a weapon to its place. Her hand moved with dignity, her face unreadable. She looked around slowly, the officers, the judge, the gallery. Then her gaze returned to the man who had mocked her. Her voice was firmer this time, calm but heavy with weight. "You think this court belongs to you? Before this day ends, you'll realize whose house you're really standing in." The words hung in the air like THUNDERCLOUDS. The judge shifted uncomfortably. The gallery stirred. The officers exchanged uneasy glances, though some forced smirks, unwilling to admit the tremor under their arrogance. Her calm silence filled the room again, pressing into every corner. A storm was coming, and only she knew its shape, and the cliffhanger burned in the minds of everyone present. Who exactly was this woman? The laughter hadn't fully returned, though the officers tried. One leaned back in his chair, forcing a chuckle, louder than before, as if sheer volume could erase the silence she had left behind. Another whispered something crude, his voice carrying just enough for the gallery to hear. The judge tapped his pen against the bench, avoiding her eyes, pretending the storm wasn't gathering. The woman stood motionless, her presence somehow heavier now, her silence pressing down on every corner. The lead officer shifted in his chair, discomfort breaking through his smug mask. He cleared his throat. "Look, don't get carried away. You think words scare us? You're standing in a courthouse full of men who run this city. You're just—" He stopped, realizing his voice trembled slightly. He disguised it with a sneer. "You're just wasting our time." Her lips curved into the faintest suggestion of a smile. Not mockery, not amusement, something deeper. Unreadable dot from the back of the courtroom. Someone whispered, "Who is she?" The question spread like a spark in dry grass. Heads turned. Eyes narrowed. For the first time, curiosity cut through contempt. The woman placed both hands on the table in front of her, palms resting gently against the polished wood. She didn't move fast, didn't raise her voice. She simply existed, and somehow that was louder than the shouts of men in uniform. The lead officer slammed his fist on the table. The sound cracked through the chamber. "Enough games. You think we don't see through you? You walk in here, flashing some plastic badge, speaking in riddles. You want respect?" He leaned closer, his breath hot with arrogance. "You'll earn it the way everyone else does, on your knees." Gasps rippled through the gallery. A woman in the second row covered her mouth. A man muttered a curse under his breath, disgusted. Yet still, the judge said nothing. His silence, thick and complicit, weighed more than the insult itself. The woman lifted her gaze slowly. Her eyes met the officer's, steady and unwavering. For a long, unbearable second, the room was silent but for the hum of the lights. Then calmly she spoke. "Respect cannot be given by force. It can only be taken when the truth walks in." Her words, quiet as they were, landed like a gavel that the judge never raised. The officer chuckled nervously, forcing the laughter back into his throat. "Truth? The only truth here is that you're out of place. And when this is over, no one will even remember your name." She tilted her head just slightly, as though studying him the way a scientist studies a specimen. The faintest trace of steel entered her voice. "My name is not what you should be worried about. What should trouble you is what happens when names turn into authority." The gallery stirred again. Whispers multiplied, questions weaving like threads in the air. A man near the aisle leaned forward. "She's not just anybody," he muttered. His words carried across the benches. The officer heard it too. He slammed the table again, harder this time, trying to crush the unease building inside him. "Authority? Lady, this court belongs to us. And as long as I wear this badge, you're nothing but a problem to be silenced." Then came the symbolic moment. He ripped the folder she had placed on the table, scattering papers across the floor like torn feathers. Pages fluttered, sliding under benches, caught by the shoes of spectators. A diagram of security protocols skidded to the gallery's edge, drawing confused stares. The woman didn't bend to pick them up. She didn't move at all. She simply let the chaos spread, the papers drifting like warnings carried by the wind. And then she spoke again, her voice unshaken. "You may rip paper, but you cannot tear the foundation it represents." The silence that followed was louder than thunder. The judge swallowed hard. Even the gallery fell still, all eyes now fixed on her. For the first time, a flicker of doubt crossed the officer's face. His jaw tightened, his smirk faltered, and in that fragile pause, the woman leaned forward just slightly, her words measured but sharp as a blade. "You don't yet realize where you're standing, but soon you will." The cliffhanger landed. Again, heavier this time. The courtroom held its breath, caught between arrogance and revelation, waiting for the storm she promised to unleash. "You think you scare us?" "Lady, the only authority in this room wears blue." The officer's voice rang out, sharp and desperate, though he tried to coat it in confidence. He gestured broadly to his fellow officers seated in the courtroom, their badges gleaming under the lights. "We protect this city. We enforce the law. And you," he pointed at her folder, now messy from the torn papers scattered across the floor, "you're nothing but a fraud hiding behind fancy words." Laughter followed again, but it was thinner this time, strained. The echo didn't carry with the same strength as before. The gallery shifted uncomfortably. A man in the back leaned forward, whispering to his neighbor. Someone else shook their head, muttering under their breath. The black woman didn't move. Her hands remained folded neatly in front of her, her shoulders square, her presence commanding without effort. She waited for the laughter to fade her. Silence a blade sharper than their words. Finally, she spoke. "The louder you laugh, the more you reveal what you fear." The line hung in the air. For a moment, the room was still. A few eyes in the gallery widened, as if struck by the weight of her words. The lead officer smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. He straightened his back, puffing his chest as if trying to reclaim the shrinking space around him. Fear? No one here fears you. You're a woman alone, standing in a courtroom full of men who own this city. The only thing we fear is that you'll waste more of our time. He leaned closer, lowering his voice to a sneer. And believe me, we'll make sure you pay for every second of it. His arrogance rippled across the officers, and a few chuckled again, though the sound was more forced than before. Then came the symbolic action. He bent down, scooping up one of the scattered papers, an official-looking diagram with a classified seal faintly embossed in the corner. He waved it mockingly toward the gallery. See this? Bureaucratic nonsense. Meaningless garbage. Nothing in here proves anything. The spectators leaned closer, squinting at the seal, their whispers louder now. That's government. One woman muttered. Another man frowned. That's not a fake look at the print. The officer caught the shift in tone. His grip on the paper tightened, and for a flicker of a moment, his confidence faltered. He crushed the page into a ball, his arrogance pushing him to destroy what he couldn't explain. He tossed it onto the floor, stepping on it with his boot. The woman's eyes followed the motion, calm but unyielding. She raised her chin slightly, her voice even. Paper can be crushed. Truth cannot. The gallery erupted with whispers. The tension in the room shifted again, subtle but undeniable. The judge, still silent, finally shifted in his seat, his lips pressed thin. His eyes flicked between the officer and the woman, unease visible even through his attempt at composure. The lead officer felt it too. His face flushed red, his smirk more brittle than before. Enough riddles, enough games. You want to act important? Then prove it. Show us who you are. The woman met his glare, unblinking. Her voice was soft, but each word struck like a gavel. I already have. The gallery stirred again, voices overlapping in quiet disbelief. The officer froze, confused for a heartbeat. He tried to laugh it off, but the sound cracked midway. What does that mean? He snapped, his voice sharp, betraying his unease. Her lips curved into the faintest smile, measured, deliberate. She leaned forward, her voice low but carrying to every ear in the chamber. It means you've been laughing at the very authority you claim to serve. Gasps rippled through the gallery. A man whispered, "She's someone." His words tinged with awe. The officer's jaw tightened. He slammed his fist on the table once more, the sound more desperate than commanding. You don't get to speak like that in my court. Her eyes locked on his, calm as ever. This was never your court. The line landed like a thunderbolt, sending a chill through the room. The silence that followed was not the silence of mockery. It was the silence of recognition, the first cracks forming in the wall of arrogance. And for the first time, even the officers in the back shifted uneasily in their seats. This isn't your stage, lady. Stop acting like you matter. The officer's insult tore through the courtroom again, louder this time, as if volume could fill the hollow space his crumbling confidence left behind. His fists pressed against the table, veins rising in his neck. Behind him, his fellow officers barked a few strained laughs, the kind men share when they are laughing at themselves as much as at someone else. The gallery no longer shared their amusement. Eyes shifted toward the woman, curious, unsettled, expectant. The black woman stood, finally moving from the place where she had been anchored in silence. The room seemed to follow her every step as she approached the table. Her heels struck the floor with soft, precise clicks that echoed through the chamber. She stopped inches from the officer who had mocked her the most. Her voice, calm yet commanding, cut through the tension. You confuse arrogance with strength, but strength does not tremble in the face of silence. The officer smirked through his unease. You think words make you strong? Let me show you what real strength looks like. Symbolism struck again. He snatched another of her scattered papers, holding it above his head before ripping it in half. The sound of tearing echoed harshly. He dropped the pieces onto the floor, his smirk returning briefly. The gallery gasped, not at the paper itself, but at what was revealed as the torn pieces fluttered down, an official header marked Department of Homeland Security. Whispers spread instantly. Did you see that seal? one man whispered. Another woman leaned forward, eyes wide. That's not fake. That's real. The officer's smirk faltered as he noticed the shift in the room. Still, he tried to laugh, kicking one of the torn halves onto the table. Big deal. Anyone can print a seal. The woman's gaze followed the shredded page. She bent down, not hurried, not humiliated, but deliberate. She picked up one half of the torn paper, holding it gently between her fingers, as though handling something sacred. Her eyes met his again. Called, you may tear paper. You may shred ink. But authority cannot be destroyed by hands that don't understand it. The gallery stirred louder, voices overlapping. Some gasped, some muttered, "Who is she?" The whisper no longer carried curiosity, it carried fear, awe, and the faint thrill of revelation. The judge finally shifted forward, his voice dry and hesitant. Order, order in the court. But the weakness in his tone betrayed that order was already slipping from his grasp. The officer's face reddened. His arrogance cracked further, fury replacing confidence. You want to play games? You want to make us believe you're important? Then say it. Say who you are. The woman turned, her gaze sweeping across the courtroom, the gallery, the judge, the officers. Her voice lowered, deliberate, heavy with warning. Names carry weight. Revealed. Too soon, they can crush unprepared shoulders. Her refusal to answer outright inflamed the officer. He stepped closer, his finger pointing just inches from her face. Enough riddles. We don't bow to threats here. You'll walk out of this court the same way you walked in, powerless. She didn't flinch, didn't move. Instead, she let the gallery absorb every ounce of his arrogance, every drop of venom in his words. Then she spoke, steady and unshaken. You mistake silence for weakness. But silence is the sharpest blade. It cuts deepest when arrogance leans too close. The officer froze, her words coiling around him. For a brief second, his bravado wavered, and the gallery saw it. A murmur spread again, louder this time. People were no longer watching her as a defendant or a stranger. They were watching her as someone who could rewrite the air they breathed. Even the judge's gavel trembled in his hand before he set it back down without striking. The woman placed the torn half of paper back onto the table, arranging it carefully, deliberately, as though restoring dignity where it had been denied. Then she lifted her eyes again, voice calm but carrying the weight of a storm yet to come. You've laughed long enough. Now it's time you learn why silence is heavier than sound. The gallery stilled, the officers fidgeted. The judge swallowed hard. The cliffhanger tightened around the room like a noose. What storm was she about to unleash? You think you can stand there untouched? The lead officer's voice boomed louder than before, desperation hiding inside the arrogance. His hand hovered above his holster, not to draw, but to remind everyone of the authority he believed his badge gave him. His boots scraped against the polished floor as he took a menacing step forward. The gallery gasped softly. People leaned back in their seats, instinctively bracing for an escalation. The black woman didn't move. Her stillness was its own kind of defiance. She stood tall, her hands folded neatly before her, her gaze unwavering. Her silence wasn't empty. It was loaded, like a chamber waiting for a trigger. The officer sneered. You want us to believe you're somebody? Prove it, or walk out of here and stop wasting this court's time. Another officer behind him muttered, She's bluffing. Just another protester playing dress-up. The others chuckled, though. Unease laced their voices. The judge shifted uncomfortably in his chair, clearing his throat. Perhaps we should. He stopped himself, his words falling uselessly into the tension. His gavel remained untouched. The woman finally spoke, her tone calm and deliberate. Power is not proven by shouting. It's revealed by who listens when you whisper. Her words sank into the silence like stones into water, sending ripples across the room. The lead officer barked a laugh, but it was brittle, more bark than laughter. You think this crowd is on your side? They're just gawking. No one here believes you. But as he turned to glance at the gallery, he caught the truth. Their eyes were no longer filled with amusement. They were curious, cautious, waiting. The symbolic action struck again. The officer grabbed the folder from her hands with sudden force, yanking it open and scattering the remaining documents onto the floor. Pages slid across the marble tiles like pieces of a puzzle, official stamps and seals visible to all. One sheet landed face up near the gallery. A bold header stretched across the top. Federal Security Briefing, Classified, Gasp Spread. A woman in the front row clutched her handbag tightly. A man leaned forward, whispering, "That's government-level clearance." The officer bent quickly, snatching the page up before the gallery could see more. His jaw tightened, panic flashing for a second before arrogance smothered it again. He crumpled the paper in his fist, glaring at her. "You think a piece of paper makes you powerful? You think stamps and seals matter in this room? This is our city, our courthouse. You're nothing here." The woman's calm never cracked. She slowly knelt, not as an act of submission, but with a deliberate grace. She picked up another paper from the floor, smoothing it gently against the table, restoring its form. Her action was simple, but its dignity burned against the arrogance. In the room, she looked up at him as she rose again, her voice steady. "Cities crumble, courthouses fall, but truth remains. And truth answers to no badge." The gallery erupted in murmurs, their voices louder now, no longer hidden. Whispers of "she's someone" and "she's dangerous" filled the air. The officer's face twisted. His arrogance was cracking, desperation leaking through. He slammed his hand on the table so hard the sound echoed like a gunshot. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice shaking despite the fury behind it. "Say it." The woman tilted her head slightly, her calm composure unshaken. She let the silence drag for a moment, making every heartbeat in the room audible. Then she spoke. Her words soft but heavy. "You don't ask a storm who it is. You realize it when it breaks." The line froze the air. The gallery fell utterly silent. The officers exchanged uneasy glances, their laughter gone. The judge lowered his eyes, his hand trembling as it brushed the gavel but didn't strike it. The officer stepped back slightly, his bravado faltering. He clenched his jaw, trying to hold the image of control, but everyone in the room felt the truth. The balance of power was shifting dead, and the cliffhanger sharpened the tension. What storm was she about to unleash? "You've got one last chance." The lead officer growled, though his voice had lost its former certainty. "Tell us who you really are, or we'll drag you out." His words hung in the air like a challenge, but everyone could hear it, the faint quiver of a man who no longer believed his own threat. The woman didn't answer. Instead, she reached for one of the scattered pages and placed it gently on the wooden table, aligning the corners with meticulous care. It was such a small action, yet in that silence it screamed louder than any outburst. The gallery leaned forward, breath caught. Even the judge's gavel hand froze midair, unwilling to interrupt. The officer snapped, "Don't play games with me." He snatched at the paper, but she slid it just out of his reach with calm precision. Her eyes met his. "You mistake patience for weakness," she said softly, "and silence for consent. But the truth is neither." The officer's throat tightened. He forced a laugh, glancing back at his fellow officers for support, but their grins had faded. Their eyes darted between the woman, the papers, and the restless gallery. The mockery that had filled the courtroom was dissolving like smoke. From the back row, someone whispered audibly, "She's not bluffing." The gallery erupted into murmurs again, louder this time. The sound rattled the walls, quiet in the courtroom. The judge barked suddenly, slamming the gavel once. But the tremor in his voice betrayed him. He wasn't commanding order, he was pleading for it. The woman remained motionless, letting the weight of the moment do the talking. Finally, she lifted another sheet from the floor. This one bore a header in bold, "National Security Clearance Level 6. She didn't wave it around or flaunt it. She simply placed it on the table, her hand resting lightly atop it. The gallery gasped again. Phones itched in pockets, but no one dared pull one out. The air was heavy, expectant. The officer lunged forward, snatching the page. His eyes scanned the words. For a flicker of a second, his face drained of color. Then he crumpled it violently, shoving it into his pocket. "She forged this," he spat. "Anybody can make up government papers." The woman tilted her head slightly, studying him the way one studies a child caught lying. "If lies were that easy," she replied calmly, "why are your hands shaking?" The gallery collectively inhaled, a single sound of realization. And sure enough, his fists were trembling against the crumpled paper in his pocket. The second officer muttered under his breath, loud enough for those nearby to hear, "This doesn't feel right." The lead officer whipped around, glaring at him. "She's nobody. Don't start doubting now." But his words were brittle, their arrogance losing its armor. The woman leaned forward slightly, her voice still controlled. "You want to expose me? Drag me out? Do it. But remember, storms don't wait for permission to break." The room froze. The symbolic storm metaphor had returned, heavier now, pressing against every corner of the courtroom. The judge shifted. In his seat, finally finding words. "Perhaps we should verify," he began, but the lead officer cut him off with a raised hand, desperate to maintain dominance. "No. She's manipulating all of you. Don't you see? She's nothing." But his own voice cracked on the last word. The woman slowly clasped her hands behind her back, posture straight, her presence radiating authority without a badge, without a raised voice. She looked directly into the officer's eyes, her calm, dismantling him piece by piece. "Every empire," she said quietly, "falls not when an enemy attacks, but when the crowd stops believing the emperor's voice." The gallery murmured louder, shifting in their seats. People who had once smirked were now staring, riveted. The spell of mockery had broken. A new power filled the room. The officer's face burned red. He stepped forward again, but this time his movement wasn't confident, it was clumsy, reactive. His arrogance was cracking wide open, and just before he could speak again, the woman leaned slightly closer and whispered, low but sharp, "You've already lost them." The line landed like a verdict. The officer froze mid-step, suddenly aware of the gallery's eyes on him, not with laughter, but with doubt, with suspicion, with judgment. The gavel struck again, but the judge's voice shook as he muttered, "Order, order in the court." But order was already gone. Enough. The lead officer barked, but this time the command rang hollow. The gallery didn't shrink back. Instead, murmurs swelled like waves against stone. A few people even shook their heads openly, whispering about corruption, about arrogance, about the strange authority of the woman who stood unflinching at the center of it all. The judge raised his gavel again, but his hand trembled. He wanted silence, yet he knew silence would no longer obey him. The woman hadn't moved. She stood calm, hands loosely folded in front of her, breathing steady. Every eye was drawn to her not because she demanded it, but because her dignity commanded it. The officer slammed his palm against the table. "This is my courtroom," he shouted. "No," a voice from the gallery answered back, clear and sharp. It was an older man, his voice carrying the weight of years. "This is the people's courtroom. And right now, you're the only one who doesn't belong." Gasps swept through the benches. The officer spun around, eyes wide, his authority shredded by the audacity of being challenged. The woman's lips curled faintly, not into a smile but into something firmer, an acknowledgement that the tide had shifted. "You see?" she said quietly, her words directed at the officer but meant for everyone present. "You've spent so long laughing that you forgot what it means when people stop laughing with you." The gallery erupted again, this time not with murmurs, but with voices overlapping, rising into the courtroom air. "She's right. They've mocked too long. Something isn't right here." The sound filled the chamber with a restless energy, a living storm pressing against the officer's brittle voice. The officer's face reddened, fury and fear warring across it. He turned desperately to the judge. "Control this. She's manipulating them. She's dangerous." But the judge didn't move. He stared at the woman now, his expression a mixture of confusion and reluctant recognition. The woman reached into her folder once more. The officers tensed, but she didn't pull out papers this time. Instead, she removed a single item, a thin silver lapel pin. The gallery hushed instantly. The pin was small, unassuming, but it gleamed under the courtroom lights like a blade. It bore an insignia faint yet unmistakable for those who knew. The officer's breath caught. He recognized it. He just didn't want to believe it. "That's a trick," he snapped, his voice cracking. "Some kind of replica." The woman placed the pin carefully on the table, her fingers releasing it like an offering. Then she stepped back, letting it sit under the lights for all to see. No theatrics, no grand gesture. Just quiet, devastating symbolism. From the back, another voice whispered, trembling, "That's federal." The murmurs surged again. People began leaning toward one another, whispers turning into buzzing realization. A pin that ordinary people never held. A symbol that didn't belong in the hands of pretenders. The officer's colleague tugged at his sleeve, panic in his eyes. What if she's telling the truth? "Shut up," the lead officer hissed, though his own voice carried the tremor of collapse. The woman finally spoke, calm as ever. Symbols mean nothing until they are placed in the right hands, but when they are, they change the air. The gallery stirred again, caught between awe and disbelief. The judge finally leaned forward, his voice hesitant. "Madam, this is highly unusual. If you are implying what I think you are, I imply nothing," she cut in gently, her words smooth but firm. "I only stand here as I am, and that is enough." The silence that followed was heavy, pulsing. The officers exchanged frantic glances. The gallery whispered with certainty, and the judge sat frozen in indecision. The officer, desperate, lunged forward and tried to swipe the pin off the table, but the woman's hand shot out, catching his wrist with calm precision. She didn't squeeze, didn't twist, she simply held his wrist steady, her calm strength enough to root him in place. Her voice lowered, each word a razor. "You've mocked me in public. You've tried to strip my name. But tell me what will you do when you realize you've been laughing at your superior?" The officer yanked his hand back, stumbling, eyes wide. The gallery gasped. The words rang heavy with promise, hinting at an identity that no arrogance could erase. And then the gavel struck again, once, twice, 3 times. The judge's face was pale. "This court will recess immediately," he barked, but his words were drowned out by the thunder of whispers exploding from the gallery. All eyes locked on the woman, and for the first time, the officer's laughter was gone, replaced by silence, replaced by fear. "You think a pin proves anything?" the lead officer shouted, though his voice cracked mid-sentence. Sweat glistened on his forehead as he glanced at the gallery, at the judge, at the faint silver gleam still resting on the table. His colleagues shifted uneasily. One muttered, "I've seen that insignia before." Another whispered, "She's not bluffing." The gallery buzzed like a hive. People who had entered the courtroom expecting routine humiliation now leaned forward, eyes wide, recording every word in memory. The woman had flipped the story, and they all knew it. The judge cleared his throat, voice brittle. This is highly irregular. If what you suggest is true, then—" The woman raised a hand gently, silencing him without force. Her calm presence outweighed his gavel, his robe, his authority. "I suggest nothing," she said evenly. "I simply am." The officer snarled, desperate to claw back control. He grabbed the pin and thrust it high. A piece of metal. "That's all this is? You want us to believe she holds power because she carries trinkets?" His hand shook as he held it up. The gallery saw it. They whispered. They doubted him. The woman's eyes never left him. Symbols outlive arrogance. They tell truths even liars can't erase. Her words slid like steel into the silence. The officer's colleague stepped forward nervously. Maybe we should hear her out." "Don't you dare." The lead officer snapped. "She's nobody." But his words no longer landed. His own men were faltering. The woman picked up another sheet from her folder, unfolding it carefully, not rushed, not dramatic, just precise. She laid it on the table, where the crumpled paper had once been. This time, the header was larger. Department of Homeland Security, Internal Clearance, Authorization. Gasps, audible, electric. The gallery rose halfway from their seats, craning to see. Someone whispered loudly, "Homeland Security?" The words rippled through the benches, a storm moving from mouth to mouth. The judge stood now, spectacles sliding down his nose as he squinted at the page. This cannot be." The lead officer laughed, but it was broken laughter, the kind that betrayed fear. Forged, fabricated. "Don't listen to her." The woman finally looked at him fully, her gaze a steady weight pressing him into silence. "You mock what you fear," she said. But mockery does not change the truth. Her calmness unnerved him more than any shout could have. The gallery erupted into open voices now. She's real. She works for the government. They laughed at her. The officer slammed his fists on the table. Enough! You're all fools. She's making a spectacle. But before he could finish, the woman stepped forward slowly, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. Each step carried gravity, each step measured. She stopped just in front of him, her eyes level with his. You called me nobody, she said. Her voice was low, steady, unshaken. You tore at my dignity. You laughed at my presence. But tell. She leaned in slightly, her words cutting into him alone. How does it feel now to realize you've been laughing at the very person who writes the rules you hide behind? The officer staggered back half a step. His chair screeching on the floor. The gallery gasped again, voices rising in disbelief and awe. The judge sat down heavily, his face pale. He whispered, almost to himself, Homeland Security. The officers behind their leader no longer laughed. Their smirks had dissolved. Now they watched her with unease, with dawning fear. The lead officer tried to speak again, but his throat caught. His authority was crumbling, slipping through his hands like sand. The woman reached down, picked up the silver pin again, and held it between two fingers. The light caught it once more, sharp, undeniable. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. This storm was never about me proving who I am, she said. It was about all of you showing who you really are. The words thundered louder than any shout could. The gallery stood now, some clapping, some whispering in awe, others simply staring as though history itself had unfolded in front of them. And in the eye of their awe, the officer's arrogance finally cracked wide open. For the first time since the laughter began, silence filled the courtroom, thick, heavy, irreversible. The storm had broken. The lead officer's voice shook as he pointed at the woman. She's lying. All of you don't listen to her. But nobody moved. The gallery no longer believed him. Their eyes were on her, calm, poised, immovable. The judge's lips parted, but no words came. He sat frozen, caught between disbelief and recognition. The weight of the papers, the silver pin, her unwavering dignity, it was undeniable now. The woman finally turned to face the gallery, her voice steady, her words deliberate. You've seen their laughter. You've heard their mockery. You've watched their arrogance. And now you see the truth. Those who claim power often fear the very thing they cannot control, justice. The gallery erupted. People clapped, others cheered softly, some simply gasped. For the first time, the sound in the courtroom wasn't ridicule, it was solidarity. The lead officer slammed his fist on the table, red with fury. This is an illusion. She's playing you. But his men weren't backing him anymore. One officer shifted uncomfortably, his voice low but audible. Sir, what if she really is who she says she is? Shut up. The leader roared, but the desperation in his tone only deepened the cracks. The woman reached into her folder one last time. From it, she pulled a sleek, leather-bound document case. Slowly, she unlatched it. The click echoed like thunder. Inside, embossed in gold, were credentials no ordinary person carried. Director of Homeland Security, Special Authorization. The courtroom froze. Gasps spread like fire through dry grass. The gallery leaned forward, eyes wide. The judge clutched the edge of his bench as if the earth itself had shifted. The lead officer staggered back. His lips trembled. His arrogance, once towering, now shrank to nothing. No, this isn't possible, he whispered. The woman set the credentials on the table, perfectly aligned beside the silver pin. Then she looked at him, her calm sharper than a blade. You wanted to laugh, she said softly. Now laugh again at your superior. The words shattered him. His face drained of color. His shoulders collapsed under the weight of what he finally understood. The gallery rose to their feet. Applause cracked through the chamber like lightning. For the first time, the woman's silence had turned into a symphony, not of her own making, but of the people's recognition. The judge slammed his gavel desperately, but the sound was swallowed by the uproar. His robe, his bench, his gavel, none of it outweighed the truth now standing before him. The lead officer's colleagues looked at each other, ashamed. Some lowered their heads. Others stepped back quietly, no longer willing to defend him. The woman's gaze swept the room, calm but commanding. Authority is not built on laughter, nor on arrogance. It is built on service, on responsibility. And when those who wear uniforms forget this, the uniform itself loses its meaning. The gallery quieted, hanging on every word. She turned back to the officer, her tone lower now. You held my ID in your hands and called it a toy. You mocked my presence in front of the people you swore to protect. And you thought the law was your shield. Her eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of fire within calm waters. But tell me, what shield do you have now? The officer's mouth opened, but no words came. His voice was gone, his laughter gone, his arrogance gone. He stood hollow, stripped bare before the very crowd he once commanded. The silence that followed was suffocating. The gallery, the judge, even the other officers, every soul in the room was waiting for her next words. She leaned forward slightly, her final line slicing through the air. This is not your courtroom anymore. It's mine. The gavel slipped from the judge's hand. The wooden crack as it hit the floor rang like a verdict, and with that sound, the collapse was complete. The courtroom no longer sounded like a courtroom. It sounded like history shifting. The gallery stood, their whispers swelling into waves of awe and respect. Phones flickered to life in cautious hands, though most people simply stared, unable to look away. The judge sat slumped in his chair, robe hanging loose, the gavel abandoned at his feet. He had lost the courtroom, and he knew it. Authority had walked past him and taken new form, embodied in the woman who stood unwavering in the center. The lead officer looked broken. His shoulders sagged, his eyes wide and vacant. The arrogance that once fueled his smirk was gone, leaving behind nothing but fear. He looked less like a man in uniform and more like a child stripped of his toys. The woman turned toward him, not with triumph but with calm inevitability. Her voice was soft, but it carried through every corner of the chamber. Justice was never yours to give or to deny. It belongs to the people, and it belongs to those strong enough to protect it. The gallery hummed with agreement. The officer swallowed hard. I didn't know. Her eyes sharpened. You didn't want to know. The words landed heavier than any sentence the judge could have handed down. She picked up the silver pin once more, fastening it gently to her lapel. The gesture was symbolic, final. The courtroom lights caught the insignia, making it glow like fire. This was never about proving myself, she continued. It was about revealing you, and now the whole world has seen. The gallery erupted, again not in chaos but in applause. The sound was steady, rhythmic, like the beating of a collective heart. The officers who had stood behind their leader now stepped away from him, leaving him isolated in the center. His collapse was complete, not because anyone dragged him down, but because he had no ground left to stand on. The judge finally rose, his voice trembling. Madam Director, this court, She turned to him, calm but firm. There is no court left here, Your Honor. Only a room that chose silence when laughter was easier. Remember this day, because justice is not blind, it only waits for someone to open their eyes. The words silenced even the applause. It felt like a final verdict, heavier than law itself. The gallery grew still. Even breath seemed loud. The woman gathered her folder, sliding the credentials back inside with deliberate precision. She didn't rush. She didn't linger. She moved with the weight of someone who had seen storms before and had always walked through them untouched. As she turned to leave, the lead officer called out weakly, his voice breaking. Wait. What happens to me? She paused at the door, her silhouette framed by the tall wooden panels, her back straight. She didn't turn to look at him. You live with the truth, she said. That's a sentence no cell can contain. The silence that followed was complete, heavy, final. She walked out. The echo of her footsteps carried like thunder down the marble hallway, and inside the courtroom, no one laughed again.